ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the delay in getting this one out. I watched the episode a little bit late, and you know what? As I was watching it a little late, people were telling me how good this episode was. All I heard online was that this episode was like one of the best episodes of The Walking Dead in a long time, that's a big claim. But to be fair, I've said a couple times recently that the Daryl Dixon show has been legitimately good, and there's been a couple episodes in there that I think could possibly qualify for some of the best that The Walking Dead has to offer, but that's a bit of a stretch when I'm hearing people say this is like the best episode of The Walking Dead and all that, so I went in a little skeptical, and quite frankly, I'm glad I waited. Not that I thought this episode was bad in any means whatsoever, not that I thought this episode was one of the best of The Walking Dead either, but I'm glad I waited to let the hype simmer down a little bit because I just watched the episode and yeah, I have some thoughts. I mean, I think this episode was easily one of the best episodes that we've seen in The Walking Dead's universe overall in honestly quite a bit of time. There was a lot going on in this episode, and quite frankly, for me, if I'm going to give like a quick TLDR of my thoughts on this episode, this episode was fantastic, but the one thing that's keeping it down a little bit on my list is the fact that we were bouncing around a little bit too much for majority of the 57-minute run that this episode was. Now, that being said, that's honestly kind of okay because at the end of it, it all kind of panned together so well. And all three stories, I guess you could say, that were going on in this episode came to a really good corner at the end, and really it made up for a great penultimate episode of the show. There was a lot there, though, that I really, really, really liked in this episode. I mean, honestly, there was so much. So the only complaint I had, and that's why I'm prefacing with this, the only complaint I had with this episode was, again, that those three stories were going on. There were three separate arcs, which it was a little bit too much bouncing back and forth. But with a 6-episode run in your first season, honestly, I guess that's like all you have to do. Like you don't really have any other choice because look, we're going into the 6th episode, the 6th and final of this season. And I'm already thinking to myself, like, okay, we have a lot here, but I have no earthly clue how they're going to wrap up, I guess you should say, an entire season's arc in just one more episode. That being said, while I am a little skeptical about that, I think in fairness, this episode demonstrated that you can do that. So we're going to get into all the pros now. And then at the end of this video, we're going to talk a little bit as well about who maybe Carol was talking about while she was on the radio. Was it Rick? Was it Dwight? Was it Morgan? Was it Negan or Morales? Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so we'll get to that. All right. But to start everything off, this episode kind of went through a series of flashbacks showing finally what happened with Daryl to allow him to get to France, while simultaneously we were seeing Daryl's journey with Laurent getting to the nest, I think it's called, or whatever. And simultaneously, we were seeing Isabel's story with Quinn and how she was like plotting to kill him, but then like backed out a little bit. And there's a lot going on. So I'm not going to go this time around into too much depth on all those storylines, but that's essentially the bigger picture. There's a ton of big things to talk about in this episode, though, that make up more of the runtime that I care more about. The first of which is Norman Reedus. Honestly, Norman Reedus as an actor in The Walking Dead, to me, while I know Norman as an actor is fantastic, I mean, I've seen him in other movies, I've seen him in even the video games he's in and things like that, he's fantastic, but for some reason, Daryl Dixon as a character just never had the range. There was nothing there. It was him just grunting half of the entire story of The Walking Dead, but my God, he just absolutely shines on a different freaking level in this episode, specifically with him freaking out at Laurent and noticing that upsets Laurent because the reason that Laurent did what he did was because he didn't want to be alone. And that immediate shift in pace from screaming and cursing, which is, again, amazing that we're getting in The Walking Dead, like all the curse words, because we never got it in the main series. But that immediately stops when he sees Laurent is in pain over what he's freaking out about. That range of acting that Norman Reedus portrays is just amazing. It's finally like what we always wanted from Daryl is more humanity in him. I mean, he's always kind of been like that tough guy, whatever you want to say, but in this episode, he just really demonstrated what makes Daryl a special character. And I've gone on record multiple times and said that I don't think Daryl's my favorite character. Like he's a good character, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't really stand out in any significant way to me. He's a good character. But this changed it. And this whole series, as a matter of fact, is changing it for me. I think he's doing an absolutely incredible job. But Norman Fetus, man, he deserves an award for this. This was seriously incredible acting on his behalf, and definitely the best we've seen of his character. So that was one of the big things in this episode. That was a big takeaway. Now, the other big takeaway in this episode was variant walkers. Woohoo! Variant walkers, my God. We finally got them in this episode. But that being said, we got them in a way that we were not expecting at all, because these weren't variant walkers the way like that we saw in The Walking Dead's main franchise, so the first 11 seasons of the show. This is different. They were pack-a-punching zombies here. It was, you know what it was like? It was actually like in the Gru movie, whatever it's called, Despicable Me, when the minions or whatever, they get injected with the serum and they become the purple monsters. That is like literally exactly what they did in this episode. And yeah, okay, it was a little corny, like for sure, but in the same vein, it worked really, really well. Like the shot of Daryl on the boat or whatever you call it, cruise ship, I was going to say, I don't know, whatever it's called. The shot of Daryl on the boat trying to escape, and that one variant walker is fucking sprinting, like outright sprinting. I loved it. Okay, yeah, it was a little cheesy, but at the same vein, it's the exact stakes we've always needed in the show, because for a while, the threat of the zombies in The Walking Dead was not there. The Walking Dead was more like the walking drama. Like it wasn't the zombie show, you know what I mean? So seeing, these sprinting walkers that'll fucking rip your feet off, it really added some range to the show. I loved it. I thought it was great. It was honestly like, I don't get scared of shows or anything like that, but it was honestly like quote unquote scary, I guess you could say, but not like, I wasn't like holding my girlfriend or anything. It wasn't like that, but it was what we needed for the freaking show. But that wasn't the only one, because that was one of, I guess, many experiments that they do. The other was towards the end of the episode, where we finally got to see how these variant walkers become variant walkers, which really, again, they're more like Pack-a-Punched, or they're more like the Despicable Me things. I don't even know what you call them. But the ending one was crazy. It was going like... It was so fucking funny, but it was also exactly what we needed. Like it worked really well. It was seriously so great to see. And knowing that we're going into this final episode, obviously Daryl's going to win somehow. I don't know what's going to happen there, but knowing that we're going into this episode where Daryl has to face like a threat that he's never faced before in these crazy ass variant walkers, like he got lucky on the boat. He jumped off and the boat blew up in the most badass cinematic John Wick shot, but whatever, regardless, we've never seen him face a threat like that. So it's going to make for an interesting couple minutes of the episode when we get this final episode. But I really liked it. And I like knowing that these variants are like a super weapon of the French people, whoever this lady is, like the French Third Reich, you know what I mean? Like they went to town. The one lady was giving speeches like she was like, you know who I'm talking about from World War II. Like it was pretty crazy, but regardless, I'm going off on tangents of that don't even matter. The point I'm making is the variant walkers were great to see, and it was great to finally learn a little bit more about them, because it makes me think like, now, okay, the variants that we saw in the later seasons of The Walking Dead, maybe are they experiments? I don't know. I'm interested, I should say, to see where this goes. It could go a lot of ways, and I guess we'll have to see that. So that's fun and all. But as far as variants, I thought that was great. I thought it added stakes that we desperately needed into the show. Now, to get to the Carol storyline and all of that, well, first off, it's great that Carol was back, even if it was in a voiceover, which makes me think that maybe it was from a production standpoint, like they couldn't get her to film. I found kind of crazy because she'd only realistically be on set for like a minute. But before we get to that, I really liked the backstory that we got with Daryl and seeing him in Maine with this group of people. The only thing I didn't like is, well, yeah, okay, great. They finally explained that, that's how Daryl got to France, but like they didn't really explain it either. Like they showed a little bit of a backstory, which sure, I get it. It's to build up a little bit of suspense and a little bit of the story so that we see why Daryl protects Laurent later in the episode. I get that. I really do. But I feel like the beginning part of that backstory was just so unnecessary, even though it was good to see. And again, like I think this was a great element of the episode. I'm not complaining that it exists. I'm just saying I do feel like the beginning portion of it wasn't that strong. Like there wasn't really much there except to use it as a motif for what we got later with Laurent, which is great because it served its purpose, but I feel like you could have moved the story along in a bit different of a way to get there. So that was interesting and all of that. But ultimately, throughout the flashbacks, we got the scene that everyone was waiting for. It was Daryl on the phone, finally getting a hold of Carol. And it was great to see, even again, if it was an off-screen appearance. Even though I think it's a little interesting that they had to do that, I love that we finally got that. We finally got some connective tissue to the main franchise, which is great. I mean, we got it a little bit earlier in the episode where Daryl was talking about Judith, RJ, Connie, Ezekiel, and then you get Laurent like praying for them. But this is great because it's direct connective tissue to the Commonwealth, to the main story and all of that stuff. And everyone's talking about it. So, okay, great. We saw Carol. Amazing. Cool. But no one gives a fuck. The only thing people care about is what she said, because she said something like, oh, he came back. Okay. Now people online are saying they heard Ick came back, and the movie Idol made a whole video where he got really excited that, that they said maybe Ick is back. All right. I love movie Idol. He's the reason I make Walking Dead videos. So like, no problems there or anything like that. But that being said, everyone online is getting so excited that it's going to be Rick Grimes. It's not going to be Rick Grimes. I mean, it may be, but there is no way on God's green earth that you're going to tell me that Carol sounded that concerned that Rick came back. Oh, you don't think that's the first things you would say on a phone call? Like, let's be realistic here. Now that we're getting F-bombs throughout the show, now that we're getting more gritty dialogue, let's get realistic here. If Rick Grimes came back, you don't think that she wouldn't be fucking head over heels, freaking out, letting Daryl know right away, making that the biggest priority over how are you? Oh, I'm good. I survive on my own. Come on, bullshit. Do you really think for a second that that's who it is? Now, again, maybe, because maybe they could set something up where he did come back and that gives him the motivation to get back home. Sure. But realistically, it's probably Dwight. Let's be real here. In the flashbacks, or not the flashbacks, in the trailers we got for season 8B of Fear the Walking Dead, we know good and well that Dwight and Sherry are coming back to King County area. They're going to the sanctuary, yada, yada. We know that's what they want to do anyway. We know they're going to get back together probably too. But regardless, for Carol to sound dissatisfied that someone is back, who else would it be? I mean, okay, maybe Morgan, but why would she be disappointed in that? Maybe Rick, but why would he be disappointed in that? I should say. Unless he died, which is a possibility. Or maybe he's back, but Michonne isn't, which I know Movie Idol said as well. But maybe, but realistically, the one person we know that Daryl hates and would hate to see back is Dwight, because he made an oath to kill him if he ever came back. So it, to me, makes perfect sense that it would be Dwight. We have no way of truly knowing until we see what happens both in this next episode of Daryl Dixon, The Walking Dead, whatever, and Fear the Walking Dead. We're not going to know until then. But more likely than not, I feel like it has to be Dwight. It only makes sense unless something really bad happened to Rick. But if something really bad happened to Rick, why the fuck are we even getting him back? You know what I mean? Like, if they brought him away, or if they took him away for all this time because he wanted to go be with his family in the real world, yada, yada, and they brought him back only just to die right away, that's fucking bullshit. I get it. And I'm the first to say, I think they need to adapt the comics because the comic ending for Rick Grimes is great. I think the character needs to die. But this quickly? I don't know if that works. I mean, maybe. We'll have to see where it goes. I just don't think that would have been the series of events at all if it was Rick Grimes. I could easily see it being the case for someone else, like Dwight, but not Rick. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think it's Rick? Do you think it's Dwight? Do you think it's Morgan? Do you think it's someone else? I don't know. Just let me know down there. I don't freaking know. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's freaking like nutting their pants over this. It's pretty insane. And I get it. I get it. I do. It's exciting because regardless, someone is most likely coming back unless it's like Heath or something and we're dead wrong. All I know is apparently the showrunners have already came out and said it's not who we think it is, which again leads me to think that it's not Rick. Guys, it's probably not Rick, okay? It's probably not Rick. But regardless, it's great to see some connective tissue. Like it really is. It's great to see that. Having Carol come back. Having, Daryl mention all of the other characters. So like Connie, Ezekiel, blah, 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 all them. It's great to see. It makes the show, which has stood on its own very well. It's made the show have some connective tissue to what we all love and give a little bit of nostalgia. And I truly do like that. Now, as far as what we're going to get in next week's episode, who knows? Honestly, I have no idea how they're going to wrap up this story arc in one more episode. But then again, I mean, this episode was fascinating by how much they threw in one episode. So maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. I don't know how Daryl's getting out of that situation unless Isabel pulls a whole Shoshana situation like Inglourious Bastards. Like, because for some reason that whole group just reminds me of Inglourious Bastards. I don't know why. Like, Isabel looks like Shoshana. The one dude with the tattoo on his face looks like any character in the Inglourious Bastards movie. Like I don't know why, but that story arc just gives me Inglourious Bastards vibes. Regardless, who knows how it's going to go? You know Daryl's not going to die. I mean, we know he was filming season 2. It's not going to happen. But I'm interested to see nonetheless. I think so far, this show has been 5 for 5. Every single episode has been a banger. This episode probably is the best one, although I am a little biased towards episode 2. I think episode 2 was absolutely fantastic. Everyone online is freaking out that this is the best one, and maybe I'm offering a slightly different opinion, and if you hate that, let's start a conversation down there in the comments. With all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video, and until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.